Semel Kaya had built his life on simple but solid foundations: hard work, honesty, and family. For over 20 years, he and his wife, Ebru, ran a small, family-owned business specializing in handcrafted soaps and organic skincare products. Their son, Mert, now 22 years old and fresh out of university, had recently joined the business with dreams of helping it expand. Kaya Natural Products wasn't massive, but it was respected in their town of Bodrum, Turkey. Customers loved the authenticity of their products, and their loyal local base meant steady, if modest, success. Expansion had always been a distant dream, something they spoke of late at night when the books were balanced and hope was stronger than fear. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Hope walked through their door wearing a tailored suit and a silver watch that glinted under the flickering shop lights. "Hello," the man said, flashing a brilliant smile. "My name is Serdar Yilmaz. I represent Orion Investment Group. I think we can make your small business into something much bigger." At first, Semel was cautious. Over the years, he'd seen many people talk big but deliver little. But Serdar was different. He spoke with authority, dropped the names of influential investors, and painted vivid pictures of growth and prosperity. His pitch was compelling: a small capital investment, some smart reallocations, and within a year, Kaya Natural Products would be supplying major hotel chains across Europe. Serdar presented official-looking documents, glossy brochures, and testimonials from other supposed clients who had tripled their revenues. He explained how, through careful financial maneuvering, the company could qualify for government grants they didn't even know existed. "I understand," Serdar said, lowering his voice confidentially, "that you might be hesitant. Family businesses are personal, every lira matters, but trust me, the real risk is doing nothing." That night, over a dinner of lentil soup and bread, Semel and Ebru debated. Mert listened carefully, occasionally interjecting. "We've always played it safe," Semel said, stirring his soup absent-mindedly. "Maybe that's why we're still small, but safe is why we still have a roof over our heads," Ebru countered. "You don't trust easily, Semel. Don't start now." Mert, ambitious and optimistic, leaned forward. "We can at least hear him out again. Maybe it's the right time to take a step forward." They agreed to another meeting. Over the next few weeks, Serdar became almost a part of the family. He charmed them with small gifts: a rare tea for Ebru, a limited edition soccer jersey for Mert, and stories of his own humble beginnings. He spun tales of growing up poor and making it big through smart investments. Semel, who prided himself on being a good judge of character, found himself wanting to believe. Serdar suggested small changes first: opening a secondary account to manage new investments, restructuring their existing savings to be more efficient. The changes were incremental, almost unnoticeable. He was careful not to push too hard. "You'll see," he said one afternoon as they sat in the cozy, lavender-scented back office. "Small steps, silent steps, that's how giants are made." Bit by bit, Serdar's influence grew. He recommended a few guaranteed return short-term investments, and when those produced quick, minor profits, the Kaya's confidence soared. Semel even started joking that Serdar was their lucky star. Mert, especially, admired Serdar's apparent success and ambition. He dreamed of modernizing the brand, creating an online store, expanding internationally. And Serdar fed those dreams expertly. "I can see it now," Serdar said one evening, standing in the middle of the shop, arms wide. "Your products in luxury spas from Istanbul to Paris. You deserve it." Finally, Serdar proposed a major opportunity. A foreign distributor was interested in a massive bulk order of Kaya Naturals products for high-end hotels in Germany. But there was a catch. They needed to show financial stability by transferring a certain amount into a holding account to demonstrate liquidity. "It's a formality," Serdar explained with a casual wave. "You'll get it back with the first shipment payment, plus interest." It was a lot of money, almost everything they had. Ebru hesitated. "It feels dangerous." Serdar didn't argue. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully and packed up his briefcase. "I understand," he said. "Not everyone is ready to grow. Some people are comfortable staying small. That's fine." That night, Semel couldn't sleep. He walked the small corridors of their home, past framed pictures of birthdays, anniversaries, a lifetime built on hard work. He thought about the long hours, the sacrifices, the dreams he had quietly tucked away for years. Was it fair to be afraid now, when opportunity finally knocked? In the end, it wasn't greed that convinced him, it was hope. The hope that he could give Mert a better future, that maybe, just maybe, all those years of struggle could lead to something more. The next morning, they transferred the money. The first few weeks after the transfer were quiet. Serdar reassured them the deal was moving forward, but there were processing delays. Then, a problem with the distributor's paperwork. Then, a legal dispute that would soon be resolved. Weeks turned into months. Stress began to take its toll. Sales at the store slowed as the tourist season waned, and with most of their reserves tied up, they couldn't afford new raw materials. Orders were delayed. Loyal customers grew impatient. Bills piled up. When Semel tried to call Serdar, he was often unavailable, in meetings or traveling abroad. Mert sent emails that received short, vague responses. It wasn't until Ebru insisted on visiting Serdar's office that the first real alarm bells rang. The sleek glass building where they had once met Serdar was empty. The sign stripped off the front door. A neighboring cafe owner told them the investment group had moved out overnight weeks ago. Panic set in. Semel contacted their bank, only to find out that the holding account Serdar had opened was emptied 2 days after they had made the transfer. Their savings, their emergency funds, everything, gone. They were devastated. Mert couldn't believe it. There has to be a mistake. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They had been conned. It was Ebru who first broke down, sobbing uncontrollably in the middle of their small living room. Semel sat frozen, unable to move, his heart heavy with guilt. Mert punched a hole in his bedroom wall, furious at his own naivety. The next day, with nothing left to lose, Semel called the police. He filed a complaint, but the officer's tired expression spoke volumes. These kinds of cases were common. Recovery was rare. 2 days later, the local newspaper ran a small article. Family business crushed by investment scam. Beloved local shop faces closure after alleged fraud. The article included a picture of their shop, the cracked paint, the closing sale sign hastily taped to the window. It painted them as victims, but it felt like an obituary for everything they had built. Somewhere across the world, scrolling through his feed after a late-night workout, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stumbled upon the story. Something about it stopped him. The quiet dignity in Semel's photograph, the raw pain in Ebru's eyes, the fierce, wounded pride in Mert's tense posture, and beneath the photo, a quote from Semel. "We trusted when we shouldn't have. We lost everything, except each other. That's what matters." Dwayne stared at those words for a long moment. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to rebuild from the ground up, to hold on to hope when the world told you it was pointless. He closed his laptop, the gears already turning in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to step in. And when The Rock decided to move, it wasn't with small, silent steps. It was with a force that could change everything. The days that followed the newspaper article were a blur of disbelief and desperate hope. Semel would wake up before the sun, staring blankly at the kitchen table, as if willing an idea to appear. Ebru stopped watering the little basil plant by the window. It wilted silently, unnoticed. Mert spent hours on the phone, chasing empty leads, hoping for a miracle. But miracles didn't come. Instead, notices did. Overdue bills, supplier cancellations, bank warnings. One by one, the fragile pillars that held up their life began to crumble. The shop, once alive with the warm scents of lavender, olive oil, and mint, became a hollow, echoing space. The shelves grew bare. The closing sale signs hung limp in the humid summer air, a silent surrender to forces they couldn't fight. Semel tried to keep up appearances for the customers who still trickled in. He would force a smile, ring up the last of the soaps, and thank them with the same warmth he had given for 20 years. But inside, something was breaking. Ebru no longer stood at the register with him. She spent most of her time in the back room, sorting through old invoices, receipts, Anything that might explain how they had been so thoroughly deceived. She replayed every conversation with Serdar in her mind, searching for signs she had missed, a hesitation, a slip of the tongue, anything. But Serdar had been flawless. Mert, fueled by anger and guilt, refused to let it go. He scoured the internet for Serdar Yilmaz, digging through forums, news archives, anything. He discovered fragments, other complaints, buried deep, from people who had been scammed under different company names, different cities, different stories, but the same ghost, Serdar, always disappearing before the damage was fully understood. Late one night, as a storm rolled over the hills, Mert burst into the living room, laptop in hand. "I found him," he said breathlessly. "Or at least, what's left of him. He's done this before. Ankara, Izmir, Antalya. Always small businesses. Always families." Semel looked up slowly from his armchair, where he sat nursing a cold cup of tea. "And what does that change?" he asked quietly. Mert's mouth opened, then closed. It didn't change anything. Their money was gone. Their trust shattered. Their future uncertain. The next blow came from the bank. The day Semel walked into the branch, hoping to renegotiate their mortgage. He returned home pale and silent. He handed Ebru a single sheet of paper, a foreclosure notice. "We have 90 days, he said hoarsely. The house they had lived in for 30 years, the house where Mert had taken his first steps, where anniversaries and birthdays were celebrated, was about to be taken from them. It was Ebru who broke the silence. "Then we fight," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "We fight until they rip it from our hands. But how do you fight when your enemy is a ghost?" Word of their downfall spread quickly in the small town. Some neighbors were kind, offering casseroles, whispered condolences, awkward pats on the shoulder. Others kept their distance, as if failure were contagious. Semel hated the pity most of all. One evening, a former customer, a woman who had once praised their soaps at every market fair, came in, brows furrowed in false sympathy. "It's such a shame," she clucked, scanning the nearly empty shelves. "But really, Semel Bey, you should have known better. These days, you can't trust anyone." Semel clenched his fists behind the counter, his nails digging into his palms. He smiled stiffly, thanked her for her concern, and watched her leave without buying a thing. As the door closed, he finally let the mask fall. He slumped against the counter, his body sagging under the weight of shame and fury. Ebru came from the back and put a hand on his shoulder. "It's not your fault," she said. But deep down, Semel believed it was. He had let the wolf into their home. He had led the family into ruin. The final blow came with brutal swiftness, a week after the foreclosure notice. Their main supplier called. "I'm sorry, Semel," the man said over the phone, his voice tight with regret. "We can't extend your credit any further. Our accountant says it's too risky." Without raw materials, they couldn't fulfill even the few remaining orders. Semel hung up the phone without a word, staring at the wall as if he could bore a hole through it. The family gathered that evening around the kitchen table, the same table where they had once celebrated small victories, like landing their first hotel contract or paying off the delivery van. Now, they sat in silence. Mert broke it. "We need to sell," he said. "The equipment, the van, everything." Ebru nodded slowly. Her hands trembled as she clutched her teacup. Semel closed his eyes. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." The words hung heavy in the air, impossible to erase. That night, unable to sleep, Mert opened his laptop again. He stared at the picture of Serdar he had found online, a grainy, smug-looking image from a corporate event. He imagined confronting him, screaming, demanding justice. But Serdar was gone, probably living a new life under a new name, somewhere far away, spending the money that had cost the Kayas everything. Frustrated, Mert turned to social media. He posted a long, raw message about what had happened, not begging for help, but warning others. He included their story, the details, everything they had lost. He didn't expect much, but sometimes the smallest cries echo the loudest. The next morning, the post had gone viral. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments, messages of support from strangers, offers of legal advice. crowdfunding links, and buried among them, a direct message that made Mert's heart stop. It was from Dwayne Johnson's verified account. "Just read your story. I'm deeply sorry for what your family is going through. Let's talk. Stay strong. Hashtag family first." At first, Mert thought it had to be a joke, a cruel prank. But then another message came. "I'm serious. Sending my team to contact you. Don't give up. We're with you." He ran to his parents' bedroom, laptop in hand, banging on the door. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe this." They gathered around, blinking sleepily. As Mert showed them the messages, Ebru gasped, covering her mouth. Semmel frowned, suspicious. "Is it real?" he asked. Mert nodded. I think it is." For the first time in weeks, a flicker of something returned to the room. Hope. In Los Angeles, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson sat in his private gym, staring at the Kaya's story on his phone. Something about them, their resilience, their refusal to turn against each other even in the face of ruin, had touched him deeply. He knew the world could be cruel. He also knew that sometimes the right gesture at the right time could change a life. He made a call. "Get me a good attorney in Turkey, someone tough, someone who fights for the little guy." Then he sent another message to Mert. "We're going to find that bastard, and we're going to make him pay." Across the world, in a small, broken home in Bodrum, the Kaya family clung to the first real lifeline they'd seen in months. They didn't know it yet, but their battle was just beginning, and this time, they wouldn't be fighting alone. For the first time in months, the air around the Kaya household buzzed with cautious excitement. Mert couldn't sit still. He paced the narrow living room, checking his phone every 2 minutes, rereading Dwayne Johnson's messages as if they might disappear. Ebru moved around the kitchen in a daze, boiling tea, then forgetting about it until the pot hissed angrily. Semmel sat silently by the window, arms crossed, watching the street as if expecting something or someone to arrive at any moment. When the call finally came, it was Mert who answered. "Hello?" he said, trying to sound calm but failing miserably. "This is Laura Jennings, a professional." Female voice replied. "I work with Mr. Johnson. He asked me to personally assist your family." Mert's legs nearly gave out. He waved frantically at his parents, who gathered around him. Laura explained everything. Dwayne had hired a top-tier international law firm, specializing in financial fraud. Their local contact in Istanbul, a sharp attorney named Selim Arslan, would be handling the case directly. Dwayne was covering all costs: lawyers, investigators, everything. "We believe your case is strong," Laura said, "but we'll need your full cooperation. Documents, evidence, anything you have." Yes, anything," Mert said eagerly. Laura's tone softened. "And Mert, please tell your parents not to lose hope. They're not alone anymore." Tears stung Mert's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you so much." Selim Arslan arrived in Bodrum 2 days later. He was younger than Semmel expected, maybe mid-30s, with a sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen the worst humanity had to offer and refused to flinch. They met at the Kaya home. The kitchen table transformed into a makeshift war room, covered in folders, bank statements, and printed emails. Selim listened carefully as Semmel, Ebru, and Mert poured out their story, occasionally stopping to ask precise questions. "How much exactly did you transfer? What bank? Which account? Do you have a photo of Serdar? Anything signed?" Piece by piece, the Kayas laid out their tragedy. When they finished, Selim leaned back, steepling his fingers. "This is a classic affinity scam," he said. "He gained your trust, made small promises he kept, then struck when you were most vulnerable." Semmel's face darkened. "Can we find him?" Selim smiled thinly. "We can try, and we can make life very difficult for him." He outlined the plan. First, file formal criminal charges with the Bodrum prosecutor's office. Second, launch a civil suit for damages. Third, work with private investigators to trace Serdar's movements, bank accounts, and possible aliases. It won't be easy, Selim warned, but with Mr. Johnson's support, you have a real chance. Hope flickered again in the room, small, trembling, but alive. The legal process began immediately. Selim moved fast, filing official complaints, gathering witness statements, and putting pressure on the local authorities. It helped that the case had gone viral. No prosecutor wanted to be seen ignoring a fraud scandal that had captured national and now international-attention. Journalists started calling. At first, the Kayas were hesitant, but Selim advised them to speak. Public pressure is your ally. He said, the more eyes on this case, the harder it will be for Serdar to hide. Mert gave the first interview to a popular Turkish news channel. His voice steady despite the weight of the moment. We trusted the wrong person, he said, but we refused to be silent victims. We're fighting not just for ourselves but for every family he hurt. The clip spread like wildfire. Sympathy poured in from around the country. Old customers returned, offering support. Strangers donated to help cover the family's immediate living expenses. Even though Dwayne was already insuring, they wouldn't lose their home for the first time in weeks. Ebru smiled genuinely as she read the messages on her phone. People care, she whispered, amazed. Semel simply nodded, a strange mixture of pride and sorrow in his eyes. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Dwayne Johnson watched it all unfold. From his office in Los Angeles. He smiled at the courage of the Kayas, at their refusal to let bitterness consume them. This is why we fight, he told his manager. But he wasn't just watching, he was acting, using his network. Dwayne quietly enlisted help from a private security firm specializing in financial crimes. These weren't ordinary investigators, they were former intelligence officers, cybercrime experts, professionals who knew how to find a needle in a digital haystack. Within days, the firm located fresh leads. A trail of electronic breadcrumbs suggested Serdar had fled Turkey. Shortly after draining the holding account, they traced his IP activity to southern Spain, Marbella, a hotspot for wealthy expatriates and, unfortunately, international criminals. Selim received the report and immediately informed the Kayas. He's hiding in Spain, Selim confirmed. But extradition will be tricky. We'll need to move carefully. Semel's jaw tightened. Whatever it takes, he said. Mert couldn't sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, mind racing. He imagined confronting Serdar, looking him in the eye, demanding answers. He pictured the courtroom, the moment justice would finally be served. Part of him burned for revenge, but a deeper part simply wanted closure. He wanted his family to breathe again. At some point, just before dawn, he drifted into restless sleep. In his dreams, he was standing back in the shop, shelves fully stocked, customers laughing, the air filled with the scent of lavender and hope. When he woke, the dream felt fragile but possible. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like a closed door. It felt like a door just beginning to open. 2 weeks later, Selim called with urgent news. Interpol has issued a red notice for Serdar Yilmaz, he announced, barely able to hide his excitement. If he tries to move, he'll be arrested. Semel sat down heavily, the weight of the news crashing over him. Mert grabbed his mother's hand tightly. We're getting him, Selim said. It's just a matter of time. Meanwhile, in Marbella, Serdar Yilmaz sat at a lavish beachside cafe, sipping an overpriced cocktail, unaware that the walls were closing in. He had done this before. He thought he could do it again. He didn't know yet that this time, he had messed with the wrong family. And that standing behind them was the rock. The storm was coming, and Serdar had no idea how hard it was going to hit. Marbella's golden beaches glistened under the early afternoon sun, the waves lazily kissing the shore as tourists lounged under umbrellas, blissfully unaware of the drama quietly unfolding among them. Serdar Yilmaz sat confidently on the terrace of a luxury villa he had rented under a false name. His skin tanned, his smile lazy. He was the picture of a man who believed he had outrun his past. Expensive wine in hand, he scrolled through real estate listings on his tablet, already plotting his next move. Maybe Dubai, maybe Bali, somewhere new, somewhere his lies could flourish again. He had no idea the clock was ticking. Across town, in a discreet corner of a bustling hotel lobby, Selim Arslan and a small team of investigators coordinated their plan. The moment the Interpol red notice had gone live, Selim had jumped on the first flight to Spain, dragging with him every ounce of momentum he could muster. Dwayne Johnson's hired security team, led by a former MI6 operative named Chris Walters, was already in place. Chris, a stoic man with piercing gray eyes, laid out the map of Marbella on the table, marking Serdar's known haunts. "We have eyes on the villa," Chris said in a low voice. "He's been there for 3 days straight." "Lazy bastard thinks he's safe," Selim frowned. "We can't just rush in. We need local authorities." Chris smiled thinly. "Already coordinating with Spanish law enforcement. Problem is, extradition isn't automatic. It'll take paperwork, hearings, weeks, maybe months." Selim shook his head. "We don't have that kind of time. If Serdar gets wind of this, he'll vanish." Chris tapped the map. "Then we trap him before he smells the fire." Selim leaned forward, the weight of Mert's hopeful eyes and Semmel's trembling voice burning in his mind. "Let's bring him down," Selim said grimly. Meanwhile, back in Bodrum, the Kaya family lived in suspended animation. Every phone ring made their hearts jump. Every knock at the door twisted their stomachs with fear and hope. Mert buried himself in research, learning everything he could about international law, extradition treaties, anything that might give him an edge. Ebru tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, cooking meals no one had the appetite for. Semmel, once the unshakable pillar of the family, grew quieter by the day, wrestling invisible demons. The wait was torture. They knew Serdar was within reach. They also knew how easily he could slip away again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in violent reds and oranges, Mert sat outside, scrolling aimlessly through his phone when a message popped up. "Laura Jennings, stay strong. Our team is in Marbella. Progress is being made. #family first." Mert smiled for the first time in days. Maybe, just maybe, justice wasn't a fantasy after all. In Marbella, the net began to tighten. Chris's team monitored Serdar's every move. Drones buzzed overhead at night, silent watchers in the dark. Local informants were paid handsomely to report any unusual behavior. Even Serdar's favorite cafe waiter was on the payroll now, subtly noting phone calls and visitors. Selim coordinated tirelessly, sending updates to Turkish prosecutors, filing emergency requests through Interpol's Madrid office, preparing for the inevitable legal wrestling match that extradition would become. But Selim knew paperwork alone wouldn't catch Serdar. They needed an opportunity, a moment to act. And fate, as it often does, delivered. It was a Tuesday evening when Serdar made his first mistake. Restless and cocky, he decided to leave his villa and visit a new high-end casino on Marbella's outskirts. He dressed sharply, linen blazer, designer watch, careless charm oozing from every pore. As he swaggered into the casino, laughing with a woman half his age draped on his arm, Chris's team followed at a careful distance. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The hum of slot machines, the clatter of roulette balls, the muted roar of laughter and cheers. Serdar was in his element, reckless, arrogant. He threw money around like confetti, ordering champagne, flashing his fake ID with practiced ease. He was so intoxicated by his own invincibility that he never noticed the two plainclothes officers, who entered shortly after him, casually taking positions near the exits. Selim sat in a surveillance van parked nearby, heart pounding in his ears. "Are we a go?" Chris asked over the comms. Selim hesitated. This had to be perfect. One slip, and Serdar could lawyer up, stall the extradition for months, or worse, disappear. He thought of Semmel's calloused hands gripping the edges of their kitchen table, Ebru's tired eyes, Mert's trembling voice asking, "Will we ever get justice?" He made his decision. Green light. Selim said, "Take him." Inside the casino, the officers moved swiftly. One tapped Serdar on the shoulder. "Sigor Yilmaz?" he asked, smoothly. Serdar turned, the cocky smile still plastered on his face. "Sorry, you must be mistaking me for someone else," he said, shrugging. The officer smiled coldly and showed him the Interpol warrant. For a split second, Serdar froze. Then he ran. Tables overturned, Chips scattered. Drinks crashed to the floor as Serdar shoved through the crowd. Panic exploding in his chest. Chris's team was ready. 2 men intercepted him before he could reach the main door, tackling him hard to the marble floor. A cry of pain escaped Serdar's lips, drawing the attention of the entire casino. Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. For the first time in years, Serdar Yilmaz was no longer in control. He was dragged outside, cursing and spitting, as flashing police lights painted the night in blue and red. Selim watched from the van, his chest heaving. It was done. The ghost had been caught. News traveled fast. The next morning, Turkish headlines blared. Fugitive fraudster caught in Marbella casino raid. Justice for the Kaya family. Serdar Yilmaz arrested. The Kaya household erupted into tears. Semel sank into his armchair, covering his face with his hands. Ebru sobbed openly, clutching Mert to her chest. Mert stood frozen, staring at the news broadcast, barely able to process the words. They had done it. No, they had done it. Them, and Dwayne Johnson, and Laura, and Selim, and Chris, and the thousands of strangers who had refused to let their story be forgotten. Hope wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. It was here. But as Selim knew too well, catching Serdar was only the beginning. Now came the hard part, bringing him home to face justice. The extradition hearing was scheduled. Lawyers were hired on both sides. Serdar, ever the snake, claimed innocence, accused the Turkish authorities of conspiracy, and tried to spin himself as a business victim. Selim rolled his eyes at the defense. Typical, he muttered. Play the victim, stall, delay. But this time, Serdar was outmatched. Selim, armed with a mountain of evidence, was relentless, and Dwayne Johnson's quiet support ensured that the media's spotlight never wavered. Serdar's lies crumbled under scrutiny. Slowly but surely, the walls closed in. Back in Bodrum, life still wasn't easy. The shop was gone. The debt was still heavy. But now, when Mert looked at his parents, he saw something that hadn't been there before. Strength. They had survived betrayal, loss, humiliation, and now they were standing on the edge of victory. Together, the road ahead would be long. But for the first time, it felt like a road worth traveling. They were no longer victims. They were warriors, and the battle was far from over. The courtroom in Bodrum wasn't grand or imposing. It was an old municipal building, walls faded by years of sun and salt. Its cracked floors a testament to a justice system often overworked and underfunded. But for the Kaya family, it was the most important place in the world. This was where everything would come to light. This was where they would finally face Serdar Yilmaz. The day of the hearing dawned cold and gray. Rain battered the cobblestone streets as people hurried under umbrellas, the stormy weather fitting the mood that hung heavy over the courthouse. Inside, Semel sat rigidly in his chair, hands clenched into fists. Ebru clutched a small handkerchief, twisting it over and over in her lap. Mert, wearing his only suit, a slightly too small navy blue jacket, paced anxiously near the windows. Selim Arslan entered, carrying a briefcase stuffed with documents. Today's just the first step, he said in a low voice. It's not the full trial. It's the preliminary hearing to establish that there's enough evidence to proceed. Mert nodded. Draw tight, we're ready. They weren't alone in the courtroom. News cameras were set up outside. Reporters crowded the entrance, snapping photos of everyone who walked in. Some supporters from Bodrum, old friends, loyal customers, had come to sit quietly in the back rows, offering silent solidarity. And then he entered. Serdar Yilmaz, handcuffed, escorted by 2 gendarmes. He was thinner than Mert remembered. His once expensive clothes now hung loose, and a rough stubble covered his jaw. But the arrogance remained. His eyes scanned the courtroom, and when they landed on the Kaya family, a smirk twisted his lips. Mert felt a surge of rage so intense he thought he might choke. Semel reached out and put a heavy hand on his shoulder, grounding him. Not here, Semel murmured. Not like this. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics. Let's begin, she said briskly. The prosecutor rose first, outlining the case in cold, clinical language, how Serdar had built trust with the Kayas, how he had manipulated them, drained their finances, disappeared. Selim followed, presenting documents, emails, bank transfers, and signed agreements that bore Serdar's forged signatures. When it was Serdar's turn to speak, he launched into a well-rehearsed monologue. "I am innocent," he declared dramatically. "I was in a legitimate business with the Kaya family. They lost money because of market forces, not because of me. I am a scapegoat." The judge listened without expression. Selim leaned over to Mert and whispered, "He's digging his own grave. Let him." Mert nodded, fists trembling with contained fury. Outside the courtroom, tension mounted. News of the trial had spread across the country. Talk shows debated it endlessly. Internet forums buzzed with theories and outrage. #Justice for Kaya trended on Turkish Twitter for days. Back in Los Angeles, Dwayne Johnson watched the updates unfold. He wasn't a man used to standing on the sidelines. Every instinct screamed at him to fly to Bodrum, to stand with the Kaya family, to lend his strength in person. But Laura Jennings, ever the calm advisor, convinced him otherwise. "You're already making the difference," she said. "Your support made this possible. Trust them to finish it." So he waited. Watched. And quietly prepared to do more if needed. As the hearing dragged into late afternoon, the judge called a recess. In the hallway, Serdar's lawyer, a greasy man in an ill-fitting suit, approached Selim. "My client is willing to settle," he said in a low voice. "If your clients drop the criminal charges, he'll return some of the money." Selim didn't even blink. "Tell your client," he said coldly, "that no amount of money will erase what he did." Selim turned on his heel and walked away, leaving the lawyer sputtering. The hearing resumed, and the judge made her announcement. "There is sufficient evidence to proceed to full trial." A ripple ran through the courtroom. Semel exhaled shakily. Ebru clutched Mert's hand so tightly he winced, but didn't pull away. Serdar's smirk faltered. For the first time, the judge set the trial date for 3 months later. Until then, Serdar would remain in custody, denied bail due to flight risk. The gendarmes moved to escort him away. As Serdar passed the Kaya family, he sneered. "This isn't over," he hissed under his breath. Mert didn't react, not outwardly, but inside. A fire roared. "You're right," he thought. "It's not over, it's just beginning." In the weeks that followed, the Kaya family threw themselves into preparing for the trial. Selim worked day and night, building an airtight case. Investigators dug up more victims who had been too afraid or too ashamed to come forward before. Each new testimony added weight to the mountain of evidence crushing Serdar's lies. Mert even started attending law classes at a local community center, determined to understand the system better. The media frenzy continued, but the Kayas learned to tune it out, focusing instead on their own healing. Small victories mattered. Ebru reopened a tiny market stand, selling homemade jams and olive oil. Semel volunteered at a community center, teaching young entrepreneurs how to spot financial scams. Mert started writing a blog, a diary, anything to release the words building up inside him. They were still wounded, but they were no longer broken. One evening, a large package arrived at their door. It was from Los Angeles. Inside, a letter from Dwayne Johnson, handwritten, "Dear Kaya family, you've shown the world what true strength looks like. Whatever happens next, know this, you're already victorious. Keep fighting, keep believing. Family is forever. With respect and love, Dwayne." Underneath the letter was a framed photo of Dwayne himself, holding up a sign that read, "Justice for the Kayas." Mert hung it in the living room, right above the old family portrait. A symbol, a reminder. They were not alone. The trial loomed on the horizon, a towering storm cloud filled with uncertainty. No one could promise what the verdict would be, but the Kaya family walked toward it. Together, heads high, hearts steady, unbreakable. They had lost everything once, but they had found something far greater, each other, and no con man, no betrayal. No courtroom could ever take that away again. The heavy oak doors of the Bodrum courthouse groaned open, and the crowd spilled inside like a rising tide. It was the first day of the full trial, the trial that would decide not just the fate of Serdar Yilmaz, but also the future of the Kaya family. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, the walls almost humming with tension. Journalists packed the benches, their cameras flashing in rapid bursts. Locals leaned forward in their seats, eager for a glimpse of justice. Even those who had never known the Kayas personally felt connected now. Their struggle had become everyone's struggle. Semmel, Ebru, and Mert walked in together, shoulders squared. They wore simple, dignified clothes, refusing to dress up for a man who had stolen their dignity once before. Selim Arslan followed closely behind, briefcase in one hand, expression like carved granite. And finally, escorted by 2 gendarmes, entered Serdar Yilmaz. He looked different now, not just thinner, smaller. Somehow his once confident swagger had been replaced by an edgy, twitchy restlessness. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal's. When he saw the Kaya family sitting straight and strong at the front, something flickered across his face. Rage, maybe, fear. It didn't matter anymore. The walls were closing in. The judge entered, a stern-faced woman in her late 60s who had built her career on complex fraud cases. Her reputation was ironclad, incorruptible, methodical, merciless to liars, perfect. The trial began. The prosecutor laid out the case, detailed, devastating, undeniable, emails, bank records, witness statements, expert testimonies. Each piece of evidence was like a nail being hammered into Serdar's coffin. Selim presented the Kaya family's side with quiet fury, weaving their story into the hard facts. A family betrayed, dreams shattered, lives nearly ruined by a man they had trusted like a brother. Ebru cried silently as Selim read aloud the false promises Serdar had made, each one a blade twisting deeper. Semmel stared straight ahead, face stone cold, hands gripping the arms of his chair, so hard his knuckles turned white. And Mert watched Serdar without blinking, memorizing every twitch, every grimace. He wanted Serdar to feel it, every ounce of pain they had endured. Serdar's defense was a disaster. His lawyer stammered through objections that were quickly overruled. Serdar himself took the stand, against his lawyer's advice, and immediately made things worse. He rambled, contradicted himself, lost his temper under cross-examination. At one point, when confronted with damning bank records, Serdar shouted, "Everyone lies. That's how business works." The courtroom gasped. The judge's gavel slammed down hard. Silence in the court. But the damage was done. From that moment on, the outcome was inevitable. Still, the trial dragged on for days. Witness after witness took the stand. Other victims came forward. A retired teacher, a young couple saving for their first home, a widowed pensioner. All had been duped by Serdar's charm, his lies, his promises of easy fortune. Each story was a fresh wound, each testimony a fresh weight on Serdar's shoulders. Through it all, the Kaya family sat in the front row, never missing a moment. They had fought too hard to look away now. Outside the courthouse, the world watched. Television crews camped out on the steps. Headlines screamed updates in real time. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag justice for Kaya. Hashtag fraud must fall. Hashtag no more asserters. Support poured in from around the globe. And quietly, steadily, Dwayne Johnson continued to back them, sharing updates, raising awareness, sending messages of encouragement that were broadcast live during interviews. It wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a movement, a battle cry against betrayal, a demand for accountability. Finally, after 2 grueling weeks, the trial came to an end. The judge called for final statements. Selim stood slowly, his voice clear and steady. "This case is not just about money," he said. "It is about trust, about community, about the belief that when you are wronged, justice will stand for you." The Kaya family lost everything because they believed in goodness. Do not let their belief be a mistake. He sat down. There was no dramatic speech from Serdar's lawyer, no stirring defense, only a weak, muttered plea for leniency. The judge recessed the court to deliberate. For hours, the Kaya family waited. Time crawled. Every tick of the clock was an agony. What if something went wrong? What if Serdar somehow slipped through again? Mert tried to read, to scroll through his phone, to distract himself. But nothing worked. He paced the waiting room like a caged animal, heart hammering in his chest. Ebru prayed silently in the corner, fingers twisting her old wedding ring. Semmel sat stiffly by the window, staring at nothing. When the bailiff finally called them back into the courtroom, it felt like stepping onto a battlefield. The judge entered, face unreadable. Everyone rose, everyone held their breath. The judge cleared her throat. "In the matter of the Republic of Turkey versus Serdar Yilmaz," she said, "this court finds the defendant guilty on all counts." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Mert barely registered the cheers erupting around them. He barely felt Ebru's arms wrap around him, or Semmel's heavy hand clapping his back. He was frozen, staring at Serdar. The man who had destroyed so much stood there, stunned, as if he couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The judge continued, "Given the severity of the crimes, the scale of the damage, and the lack of remorse, this court sentences the defendant to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole." Serdar's knees buckled. The gendarmes caught him, pulling him upright as he was handcuffed once more. This time, there would be no escape. No second chance, only justice. Outside the courthouse, the sky had cleared. The rain was gone, leaving behind crisp, clean air that smelled of salt and earth. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing, cameras rolling. But the Kaya family didn't speak to them, not yet. They stood together on the courthouse steps, arms linked, heads high, faces toward the sun. They had weathered the storm. They had survived, and they had won. Not just for themselves, but for everyone who had ever been betrayed, used, lied to, left behind. Today was their day, and it was just the beginning. The sun broke over Bodrum in a golden blaze, casting long shadows across the cobbled streets, painting the harbor waters in shimmering gold. It was the first morning after the trial, the first morning the Kaya family woke up free, free from fear, free from uncertainty, free from Serdar Yilmaz's shadow. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air smelled sweeter. The sounds of the town felt livelier, and even the old olive trees in the family's battered backyard seemed to stand a little taller. Mert stood by the window, a steaming cup of Turkish coffee in his hand. He watched as the street below came to life, fishermen hauling in nets, kids chasing a soccer ball, tourists already bargaining at the market stalls. Life was moving forward, and so were they. Behind him, the house buzzed with a new kind of energy. Ebru was in the kitchen, singing softly under her breath as she prepared breakfast. Semmel repaired a broken stool in the corner, whistling an old folk tune. Simple things, beautiful things, the kind they had almost lost forever. Later that morning, they held a small gathering at the family home. Neighbors came bearing gifts, jars of honey, baskets of fresh bread, bouquets of wildflowers. Friends they hadn't seen in months stopped by just to hug them, to tell them how proud they were, how strong they had been. Even some strangers, people who had followed the trial online, who had been touched by the Kaya's courage, showed up to offer congratulations and support. It wasn't about the gifts, it was about the love, the sense that, somehow, the whole town had wrapped its arms around them, refusing to let them fall. Mert gave a short, simple speech. "No matter what we lost," he said, voice thick with emotion, "we never lost each other, and because of that, we never truly lost anything." Tears glistened in many eyes as applause filled the air. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled up outside the house. A figure stepped out, broad-shouldered, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. At first, the neighbors gasped, murmuring in excitement. Mert stared, disbelieving. It was him, Dwayne Johnson, in Bodrum, in their little street, without an entourage, without cameras, without fanfare. Just him, just a man coming to pay his respects. Mert ran to meet him, and Dwayne pulled him into a bear hug. "You didn't think I'd let you finish this alone, did you?" Dwayne said, grinning wide. Mert laughed, still a little stunned. I don't even know what to say." "You already said it," Dwayne replied, tapping Mert's chest. "Right here. You fought with heart, and you won." The whole Kaya family swarmed out, and soon they were all laughing, crying, shaking hands. Neighbors gawked openly, whispering, taking photos, but Dwayne didn't care. He sat at their worn kitchen table, drinking Turkish tea from a tiny glass, telling stories, listening to theirs. He wasn't a celebrity here. He was a friend, family. That evening, Dwayne and the Kayas walked down to the harbor. The sunset set the sky ablaze in oranges and pinks. The smell of salt and grilled fish filled the air. Boats bobbed gently in the waves. Mert kicked off his shoes and waded into the cool water, laughing like a child. Ebru threw her head back and sang an old song from her youth. Semel sat on the dock, feet dangling, face relaxed for the first time in years. Dwayne stood beside them, hands in his pockets, breathing it all in. "You know," he said softly, "what you did here. It's bigger than just winning a trial. You gave people hope. You showed them that even when the odds are against you, even when the world feels broken, you can fight back, and you can win." Mert turned, the setting sun lighting up his face. "We couldn't have done it without you," he said. Dwayne smiled and shook his head. "You had everything you needed all along," he said. "You just needed a little reminder." He clapped Mert on the back. "And besides, family sticks together." As night fell, lanterns were lit along the docks. Music drifted from nearby cafes. Children's laughter echoed. Down the alleys, couples danced under the stars. And the Kaya family danced too awkwardly, joyfully, without care. They danced for the dreams they'd rebuilt. They danced for the memories they refused to lose. They danced for the future waiting. Just ahead, in the months that followed, life blossomed anew. The Kaya family opened a new business, a small cafe by the sea, serving homemade pastries, fresh coffee, and the best breakfast in Bodrum. They named it Yeni Kafik, New Dawn. Locals flocked to it. Tourists discovered it. Stories of their fight inspired thousands. A small scholarship fund was created in their name, helping young entrepreneurs avoid financial predators. And Mert, he kept writing. His blog, Fighting for Family, became a sensation, eventually landing him a book deal. His story traveled farther than Bodrum, touching hearts across the world. Ebru found herself counseling other families who had been victims of fraud, helping them heal. Semel taught classes about business ethics and honesty at the local community center. Their pain had become purpose. Their scars had become strength. Every now and then, a postcard would arrive from Los Angeles, always signed the same way. "Family is forever. Stay strong. Stay proud. Love, Dwayne." They framed each one and hung them on the wall of the cafe, right above the register. Not for fame, not for profit, but as a reminder, a promise. And so life rolled forward, wave after wave. The pain of the past never vanished completely, but neither did the pride of surviving it. The Kaya family had lost everything once, but they had rebuilt stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The sun rose over Bodrum once again, casting its golden light over the town, the harbor, the little cafe named Yeni Kafik. A new dawn, a new beginning, and this time they were ready for anything.